So we're going to look at some control structures now, how the programs can be controlled. And the most basic, and probably the first one we should look at, is the if statement. So this basically just allows us to compare values and choose actions based on some criteria. We'll get going here. Just open up a file here. I'm just naming mine if calculator. So we can start by making some variables. We're going to get some input, so we'll start x equals, and it's going to be a calculator, so we're going to make it an integer. Make one x, one y. Okay, so we have some input statements ready to run here. We're not getting any errors yet, so let's keep going. So just make print. We're going to get tell our user that we want them to figure out what operation we want to do. So we'll just give them that. Make the input statements, we'll just put OP for operation equals input, and this can just be a character because we're going to use it for comparing later. So we're just going to put input, and we'll give them all the different characters that they can choose. So adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, etc. So we put all the basic ones in here. Then we're going to make an if statement. So if the operator is equal to do an equal to, you need to do two equal signs. So it's not just equal, it's if it's equal to or identical to, and then give it the plus. So if our operator is plus, then a colon, and then we will do the operation. So we're going to make a print statement for that. Now, so if the operator is plus, then we're going to print, we'll just print out the statement. So I can use the variables that I've been given, x, and then I can use the operator, because the operator is going to be a character I want. So x operator y, and then I'll have to use the equal sign, because I don't have a variable for that. And then x plus y. So I'm able to call the variables I need to and do the math on them that I want. So it's going to make my print statements pretty straightforward. So my print statement is going to be x, the OP variable, operator variable, then y, then the character, the equal character, and then the answer to x plus y. And I can continue doing this, and I can just sort of copy this bit of code, go down, paste it, and then keep changing the operator until I get all the operators accounted for. If you're used to coding, you already know the mistake I'm making here, but we'll get to it a little bit later. There's two mistakes in here, and I just wanted to show you how they're gonna play out. So don't get too frustrated if you're like, "What are you doing?" So those are all my statements that I'm gonna need to have to print out, whether it's adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, exponents, modulus, or forward division. And so once I have all those done and through, I should also have an else statement. So the program's gonna run something if none of those are true. So we're gonna go through else. And we'll just make an else statement and have it just print invalid input. I think we should be ready to run the program once. And when we run the program, we get a great error, and it says invalid literal int with base 10 number. So we have to figure out what's happening here. It tells us that on line 1 it happens. So right at the top, our error code tells us exactly where it's happening. So we have to figure out what's wrong here. And if you remember from last time when we were doing the input statements, you should be able to see exactly what I did wrong here. What I did is I actually have my input statement before my int. So what I'm doing is I'm telling it to input an integer that's based on number. And I want to do it the other way around. So I will change this around, and I will put, I could put int open input, but if you remember last time, we need a float here, not int. So we do float input. So when we run that, we don't have the same problems. So we can put in our numbers. What we'll notice though is right when we're doing this is we're going to get two parts. We're going to get the answer that we're looking for, and then right after that it's always going to state invalid input. And the reason is we have this problem with our if statements. So we have if all the way down here. So what ends up happening is it runs each if statement individually. And then on the last if statement, if it's not true, it's going to go to the else statement. What we want is not to run each if statement separately. What we want is to have this run as one logical group. So we can do, if we want them to run one after the other, instead of using if, we use else if. In Python, you just do elif, E-L-I-F, and that will run all those to else if. So we'll change all those operations to just add the else if. So we can run these through now, and now what ends up happening is it'll run each statement individually. It'll go, is this true? Well, else if this is true, else if this is true, else if this is true, and if nothing else is true, it'll run the else statement, which is invalid operator. And that's the way we want it to run. So when we run through, it's going to give us, it's going to check the user input against all these statements, and then at the end, if it finds no matches, then it's going to run the else statement. One thing we'll see here is we have to run the program individually every single time. Whereas it's nice if we could have it in a loop where we could just keep going and looping over and over again until the user intentionally exits the loop. And that would be good in the case where we have an invalid input, where it gives them the chance to try again, or if we just want to do multiple calculations. This is if. We're going to look at for loops. We're going to look at while loops. We'll look at more complex statements than just the simple equals. We'll look at compound statements. So this, and this, and this, or this. And then, so it'll allow us to do a wide variety of decisions and a wide variety of sort of decision making to allow our user input to have an effect on the state of our program. So one little thing you can do here, both a little bit of this and a little extension. You can make a simple little games out of here. The guess a number from 1 to 10. It seems really simplistic, but you're going to have to figure out how to generate a random number and then compare the user input to your random number. And it becomes a little bit more complex than you think it is because you've got to generate a proper random number. If you've never done that before, it's going to take a little looking. That's one thing I'd like you to do. Figure out how to generate a random number. Then use your knowledge of the input statement to have a user guess what the number is going to be, and then tell them whether or not they got it right.